It's November 17 and you are listening to the Basu and Godin Notebook. I am Marc-Antoine Godin with Harp Basu. How you doing, my friend?
I'm good.
Yeah.
We're in two different cities again. This is fun.
I know.
I'm in Montreal. You're in Boston.
Yes.
This is good fun.
The city of parking extortion.
Yes. Yes, especially anywhere close to the downtown area. It is really quite a racket they have running in Boston, but good for them. Good for the parking people in Boston. Everyone deserves to make an outrageously criminal living. But
yeah, it's funny. Boston and racket are not two words I would put together. All right, so today we got a broad range of topics. We're gonna discuss Xhekaj. We're gonna discuss Brendan Gallagher's lack of discipline. We have our traditional Prospect Friday. Today's prospect who's going to be in focus is Sean Farrell. And but first and foremost, Arpin, I'd like to hear you on something that you brought up with Martin St. Louis today at practice. We know that Marty likes to have on the power play most of his righties on one unit and some lefties on the other unit. And he's been very consistent regarding that. He's been very consistent also with his lines. What does it? Are there already some conclusions that we can draw about Marty St. Louis being a guy that will look for continuity and stability? You know, I wouldn't say at any cost, but certainly as much as possible in the way that he manages this team.
Well, it certainly seems like it so far this season, right? I mean, it's if we look at this through the lens of Josh Anderson remaining on power play one. So essentially when Kirby Dach goes down, he's a right-handed shot. Martin St. Louis could look at it and say, okay, well, I have two options. I have Josh Anderson, I have Jesse Ylönen. Those are my two options. Well, Joel Armia wasn't on the team at the time, but when Joel Armia was up,
Gallagher.
You had Joel Armia.
Or
Brendan Gallagher was already on the second power play unit. Yeah. So when you limit what you're doing on the power play, where you have to have a certain handedness of shooter in a certain position, no matter how effective that player is being, it seems to limit you, and he didn't feel that way, obviously, because he's sticking with this. But, it begs the question, when Josh Anderson barely ever shoots on the power play, does it matter what side he shoots from? Does it really make a difference? So it's being kind of coy, but it does lend itself to some predictability for the power play. We know that the first unit, and of course the opponents know that the first unit is almost always going to attack from that right circle with Nick Suzuki quarterbacking it. The second unit is almost always going to attack from that left circle with Alex Newhook quarterbacking it. So it's, and I think the Canadians try to play off that predictability, and they do try to switch things up and keep penalty kills on their toes. But it just, and when Marty was answering the question, it was the second question he'd gotten on the power play, and obviously the power play didn't get the job done against Vegas, but by and large, the power play has been pretty good. Not amazing, but pretty good. Good enough where he clearly felt that, why am I taking questions on the power play? Because at one point he goes, what's our power play running at right now? And I was like, yeah, I'm not saying the power play is bad, but sometimes it doesn't mean it can't be better. It doesn't mean you can't be proactive with things. And I think that's one thing that we've seen with Martin, even admitted it, that we'd mentioned in the last episode where he came out or one of the previous episodes where he came out and said, listen, that was on me, the results and this and that. And I got too caught up in the results, and I put Band-Aids on things that might have required minor surgery, then went about making the most wholesale changes we've seen from him all season. And all it meant was swapping two centers, Suzuki and Dvorak, and switching all his defense pairs. Aside from that, it takes a lot. It takes an injury or something pretty extraordinary for Martin St. Louis to really make a change. He had Josh Anderson on the top line. He took him off once it was clear it wasn't working. So more overall, not, I'm interested in the power play thing, but none of the lines changed to practice on Friday. I'm guessing we're not going to see any change in the forward lines in Boston on Saturday. Um, is he too patient? And does he have too much of a player's outlook on it where I would imagine as a player, he liked having continuity, he liked building chemistry with line mates, and he liked not having the coach tinker so much. There's got to be a better balance here because, the 5-on-5 results
No, right now
haven't
they're
been
not
great.
there.
And
No,
aside from
no.
No, they're not there, and they scored some goals against Vegas, but they gave up a bunch as well. So,
right. I think that there might be something of a PTSD effect at play here because of all the injuries from since he took over and the lack of personnel at hand. Not having his whole team at his disposal made it look for that stability constantly. And now that he's pretty healthy, apart obviously from Kirby Dach up front at least. He can experiment with that and say, you know what, I'm going to give it the test of time and see if players can work through their troubles, if we can let time for a certain chemistry to establish itself. He mentioned last year how familiarity was a key to the success on the power play. And honestly, I mean, they didn't score against Vegas, but I mean, it's only the second time since the second and third game of the season where they're shut out on the power play in consecutive games. So overall, things have been, as you said, going pretty well. But as I was driving to Boston today, I had, a lot of time to tinker on all those things. And I don't want to get too much into the nitty gritty of things, but you mentioned Josh Anderson on the power play and the fact that so you've got a guy on the bumper who's a right-handed shot. Well, if you were to put a left-handed shot, let's say, in the bumper position, your main passer, apart from the defenseman who moves things from left to right, your main passer on the unit remains Suzuki. But Suzuki, if he fakes a shot and there's just a redirection, it's almost easier if the guy is a lefty rather than the right.
Yeah.
And the main shooter is Caulfield, or is expected to be Caulfield, because Suzuki, as I pointed out in the last episode, is shooting a lot more than people give him credit for. But Caulfield, if he wants to shoot, but then chooses to pass, the shortest, quickest, and most effective pass he could go to is a quick pass to the guy in the bumper if he's available. And that way, the bumper, if he's a left-handed shot, then he's ready for a one-timer. So it would serve two purposes, to have and to be able to go one-timer by being fed by Caulfield, and to redirect if you receive a shot pass, let's say from Suzuki on the right side. It could open up some new. It should open up some new possibilities, and of course, you're going to talk about Monahan also, who could be another option, right?
Well, yeah, I mean that play that they try from Monahan to the bumper guy is easier if you're a lefty shot and you're basically cutting to the net. It just makes an easier angle. So yeah, that's what I was kind of getting at with Marty. He didn't really seem to share my point of view or anything, but yeah, I mean, of all the guys who have played on the power play, only Alex Newhook has a worse shot rate than Josh Anderson. Josh Anderson's shot rate is way behind everyone else on the top unit. I mean, you have Suzuki getting off, just over 14 shots per 60 minutes, Matheson and Caulfield at 13 and a half. You have Monahan at 9, and then Josh Anderson is just under 7. So and again, I think we mentioned this previously. Like, I think Josh Anderson is not doing everything bad on the power play. I think he's excellent at puck retrievals. He's excellent at kind of repairing broken plays. Like when plays get kind of scrambly, he's good at getting the puck back and getting the puck back under control and kind of maintaining possessions in the offensive zone. But a lefty could do that. And it'd be nice if someone who could do that could also pop a goal every now and then. Because it's honestly like, I don't even know if it's even Josh Anderson's fault, but the Canadiens aren't using that position. They're not getting shots from there, and it's not a threat. And so it might have something to do with Anderson just not fully understanding lanes and movement and how to pop into open space. But we've seen many teams effectively use the bumper. The Canadiens haven't been able to forever. We've been talking about this for years. Remember when they first got Dvorak? The huge thing about Christian Dvorak was how good of a bumper guy he was. And Genny Dodonov, we talked to about at the beginning of last season. I mean, we've been talking about this bumper spot for so long.
Yeah.
And, Anderson is just not that guy. And so, but I do wonder so you have a lefty in the bumper position. You're not getting one-timers from the bumper anyway. So as you just mentioned, having a lefty doesn't hurt you in that way and does open up other possibilities. But just because I feel like all the guys on the second unit, and I'm thinking primarily of Slafkovsky, but I mean, even Newhook, but the guys in the second unit, they've got to be, I remember talking to Xhekaj about this. The pressure is on them because they know they're going to get like 30 seconds on the power play. And they basically get one entry. And they better nail that entry or else their power play time is over. And so there's this constant pressure to produce, And so it's either mix up the units a bit and give it kind of a different look, or maybe give the second unit a bit more time and not go so heavily on the first unit. I don't know. And again, bears repeating, the power play is working relatively well. And so it's not something where you want to completely redo everything. But the question that actually Eric Engels of Sportsnet asked, and I think we've asked it on this podcast, is, maybe Ylonen, if you have to have a right-handed shot, maybe Ylonen would be a good option there, especially on a night when he scored a couple of goals. I think he finished last on the team in ice time in that game against Vegas, or just ahead of Pizzetta.
Actually,
if I'm not mistaken, he got 5 seconds more than Pizzetta.
That's right.
Yeah, he was 7:17, and Ylonen was 7:22, and he got 10 shifts in the game, scored on 2 of them. It's 20% of his shifts. It's pretty good. And so, kind of goes back to, you don't want a coach that tinkers too much. You don't want a coach that doesn't tinker at all. What's the proper balance there? I'm not sure, but it just, it seems like today, and who knows, maybe in Boston, maybe today was a smokescreen, maybe in Boston, Marty's going to switch things up a little bit, but it just seems like the team could use a little change. And when, he was asked today, on Friday, Marty was asked about keeping the Monahan line together. And because, I think at first, over the first, say, 12 games or so, 13 games, it made all the sense in the world. They were a very consistent line. They were producing.
Right.
Hasn't really been the case of late. And he said the primary reason why he's done that is to balance out his lines. And, that has merit. But, I think I think Cole Caulfield scored 2 goals at 5-on-5 this season. There's some guys that could use some help, even though Dvorak, I think, has played really well between Caulfield and Suzuki, and not Suzuki, Slafkovsky.
Yeah, he has.
But, Sean Monahan's sitting there, and Marty's kind of, I think, sticking to an idea of that line that was true a few games ago, but isn't necessarily true anymore.
No, and I mean, you have to accept the fact that sometimes things are not going to work for a certain period of time. And if you move things around, well, then you can come back to that formula later on, knowing that it has worked. So you can also put it in your back pocket and say, well, at a later date, I come back because I know it can be effective. But right now, the Monahan line is getting buried. In terms of, it started off that Sean Monahan was one of the 3 guys in the NHL that played the most without giving up without being on the ice for a goal against at 5-on-5. Now, all 3 members of that line have been on the ice for 9 goals against in the past 7 games. So since the St. Louis game. That's pretty much double the amount than any other line or any other forward on the team. And in that span, Gallagher and Pearson have been on for 1 goal, Monahan for 2 goals, or if not the other way around. But it's been they're in the serious negative in terms of differential in that department. So that chemistry that we saw at the beginning, what seemed to work so well, right now is not working. But I find that as much as Monahan, if you put him with probably more dynamic players, younger players, it might open up some new possibilities. Maybe making sure that he starts the vast majority of his shifts on the offensive zone. When you have Evans and Dvorak, in the lineup, there's no reason to put Monahan out there in the defensive zone. But if you break up that line, who do you give Gallagher to? And to me, that's an issue because Gallagher needs to keep his shifts short because after a certain amount of time, he becomes a liability out there. But if you have him play, let's say, mainly defensive starts minutes, either with Evans or Dvorak, he's got 200 feet of ice to cover to do his thing and go work in the blue or in the dangerous areas. And if he goes to play with Suzuki, well, Suzuki's one guy who tends to extend his shifts and ends up being on the ice for an easily 55 seconds, on any given shift. So it's a little bit tricky, and the windows to make Gallagher work and have his play being the most impactful on the team seems to be limited, and the best fit remains Sean Monahan.
Well, yeah, a lot of guys best fit is Sean Monahan. I mean, I was talking to Uri Slavkovsky today, and their little pregame handshake ritual is based on a game last season when they were playing on the same line, and he said, "Oh, we must have scored that game because we've been doing it ever since." And so I think Uri Slavkovsky in his short NHL career has shown that his best fit is Sean Monahan.
His handshake, for those who have not seen it, the handshake is basically just before the game, before they get on the ice, they give each other a handshake, very formal, very business, without their gloves, and the proper handshake.
It's a really proper handshake, yeah. Like Yuri Slavkovsky is walking down the line, and they're all laughing, and they're all getting pumped up for the game, and he sees Sean Monahan, he goes total stone face, removes his glove. Proper, a little nod and a shake. So anyhow, so that's the origin story of that, is based on some game last season when they were playing on a line together, and so that's what they do. But anyhow, it's a lot. And again, and Nick Suzuki and Cole Caulfield, if they were to be put back together, have shown that they work well with Sean Monahan. So I will continue to believe that there would be no problem putting Brendan Gallagher with Jake Evans. The defensive zone start thing you mentioned. When Brendan Gallagher was at his best, he started all his shifts in the defensive zone. It was a constant, steady stream of defensive zone starts playing with Phil Danault and Thomas Tatar. He's not the same player now, but it's not as if it's a job that he hasn't done before that he couldn't handle. It's the limited sample we saw of them of Evans and Gallagher together last season was promising, so it's worth a shot to see if that is something that could work again. Right. But the main benefit of it would be freeing up Monahan to be playing in a more appropriate role, because Gallagher's, listen, I don't put much stock into plus minus, but he is the worst plus minus on the team at -9. It's worse than Monahan's, it's worse than Pearson's, and so it's not necessarily working as well as it did. And that's the thing, is that I think in Martin St. Louis' mind, if you keep it, the sample of their good games was long enough that this could just be considered a slump, and then they'll work out of it and they'll go back to being that line, which is fair. Maybe that'll happen. But as things stand right now, Sean Monahan at 5-on-5, I don't want to say he's being wasted, but it's I think he could be used more effectively, and it could be used to get other players going a little better than the way he's being used now. And then it's And when you add the
clearly,
fact that
clearly he's being used as the third line center. If you say being used with better line mates, so Pearson and Gallagher in your mind are like the third line wingers, whereas Slavkovsky and whether it's, let's say, Slavkovsky and Henderson or Newhook or whatever, those guys are more like top six wingers in your mind.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's fair to say. I don't think that's a knock on anyone, but it's just that the timing of something like that would be appropriate too, considering as you mentioned off the top, the fact that Gallagher took a penalty that really cost the Canadians against Vegas. I don't want to say it cost them the game, because there's a lot of things that they did wrong in that game that put them in the situation that they were in. But in that situation, at that critical juncture of the game, to take a double minor for high sticking, and Nick Suzuki tried to defend him and said, that guy had a good scoring chance. You got to eliminate the scoring chance. It wasn't a reckless penalty, and he's just unlucky that he got him up high. Martin St. Louis after the game was very brief and just said it can't happen twice. And it's funny, those exact same words Brendan Gallagher himself used the game before to describe the performance of the referees. Yeah, saying that it can't happen, that you make that the guy in the neutral zone makes that call when the guy who's right next to me saw the play and decided not to whistle it down. So it's, I think that would be, it would be good for Martin St. Louis to be proactive a little bit and not wait for things to get to the situation that it did prior to the Detroit game, where the Canadians were on a real low and he just almost felt forced to do something. Sometimes, you should kind of follow his own advice when he says, the results can mask certain things, or that, a Band-Aid is inappropriate when it's minor surgery. I think even though the Canadians are not in dire straits, I think some minor surgery would be appropriate at right around this time. So
what do you make of those late game penalties from Gallagher? Because he's had a few so far this season, but it's not exactly a trademark of his. He doesn't, prior to this year, doesn't have a history of being a guy that puts his team in trouble with untimely penalties. I mean, other guys, a lot more than him. So what's new? Is it just circumstantial, you reckon?
No, I think he's put himself in some bad situations, and I think he hasn't kept the game situation in mind. I looked at all his penalties last night after the game, and there are a few that jump out. There was a game against Columbus where he took one with less than a minute left. The game was tied. Canadians killed that penalty, killed what carried over into overtime, which was, I think, 1:05 of overtime, where they had to kill a 4-on-3, and then they wound up winning the game in overtime. He took the second hooking penalty that gave the Boston that very long 5-on-3 last weekend. And then obviously he took the one against Calgary, which, listen, I would agree that shouldn't have been called. And that the guy in the neutral zone definitely shouldn't be calling it, but Gallagher's stick was there. I mean, he put them in a position where they could make that call. Bad call or not, you're giving them an opportunity to make that call. And then last night, so I asked Suzuki about it after the game, because he had a long conversation with one of the referees. And so basically the problem was that they told him that they're going to review it. And he's like, well, wait a minute. You can't review a penalty. You can only review a double minor for high sticking. And they had initially called hooking, because if you look at the play, the shaft of Gallagher's stick hits the guy in the mouth, and then he hooks his hands. So there was a whole series of penalties that
could have been 6 minutes.
Called.
It could have been 6 minutes.
It could have been 6 minutes, because he did hook him. So the initial call by the ref was hooking, but then the linesman came in and said that needs to be a double minor for high sticking. You got him in the mouth, and I think the guy lost some teeth. And so essentially what Suzuki was explaining was that we thought it was hooking. The linesman came in, and the linesmen are allowed to call a double minor for high sticking. And once that happened, they were allowed to review it, and the review upheld the penalty. Brendan Gallagher didn't argue it much, was just sitting in the penalty box sheepishly, and then had to watch as the Golden Knights scored 2 goals to win the game with him in the box. So this is, you're right, this was not all that common, but I mean, we have seen it in the past. I remember a game, I think a game against the Flyers in the bubble. Am I remembering that correctly? The bubble playoffs where that's one where he didn't get a call and his mouth was all bloody, but
exactly.
It is,
yeah.
He's
Niskanen.
He's had some carelessness with his Matt Niskanen, exactly. And he's had some issues with carelessness with his stick. And that happens, but he's got 18 penalty minutes. He's got 9 minor penalties in 17 games. It's a lot. And so, again, as long as, and I think I wrote about this before the season started, like, what is it so bad to have Brendan Gallagher on line with Jake Evans, the quote unquote fourth line? He probably wouldn't like it. It would be tough to see a guy making $6.5 million on the quote unquote fourth line, but I don't know. At this point, if there's a message to send to your players, it's game clock situation. The Canadiens would have been better off had Gallagher let that guy go and take your chances that Primeau makes the save. But even if he doesn't, you got over 2 minutes left. You can get back in the game. It's worse. It would be better than what happened ultimately, where they give up 2 goals and basically have no chance of getting back in the game. So this would be a right time to send that message that, even the veteran guys, when they're taking penalties like that, the one that clearly bothered St. Louis, listen, that's as close as St. Louis is going to come to criticizing a player publicly. This would be a good time to send that message and maybe put him down the lineup and put up a guy like Ullinen after he put up 2 goals,
Yes, or to continue in the vein of Martin St. Louis saying that he wants to balance his lineup. I think that what we've seen, for example, from a guy like Raphael Harvey-Pinard, when he's been playing with Evans and Ulonen, that line has been a lot more dynamic and offensive than when he's not on that line. But if you have a fourth line made of Gallagher, Ulonen, and Evans, you have a chance to have a fourth line that actually spends quality time in the other end, that knocks at the door. I mean, right now, Jake Evans is having quality chances after quality chances, not necessarily him, but his line. And it's been that way for quite a while now. So maybe that this line could use a little bit of the offensive acumen that Brendan Gallagher can still provide, and try to create even more of an offensive threat by empowering your fourth line and seeing, let's say, that if Harvey-Pinard is ready to come back in short order, well, you can put him somewhere else on the top 9. That could be a solution, because the Canadians won't have like an uber sniper readily available to jumpstart their top 6. They don't have that guy, so they have to work with what they've got. They have to work with the fact that Kirby Dach is gone for the rest of the year. So with the elements that they have, either they choose to go top heavy, load the top 6, and good luck with the rest, or you say, well, we'll come at you in waves, and shift after shift and line after line, we're going to be somewhat of a threat and somewhat of a menace offensively. So, which is what Marty himself said he likes. That's what he wants. And so he doesn't have that right now. He does to some extent, and obviously penalties make it difficult to roll your lines. But that's when the Canadiens are playing well. That's how Marty likes it. That's how Marty gets them to play well. Is coming at teams in waves, having balanced scoring, and so I think there's opportunities here, but it's there's a spectrum of being too tinkery and being not tinkery enough, and I think Marty wants to err on the not tinkering enough, not tinkering or too he wants to err against tinkering too much. Yeah, he probably didn't like that as a player. I can't remember if Tortorella did that much in Tampa, but I feel like he did a fair amount. But yeah, I think this is we're at a moment right now where it's not screaming like let's change everything, and I'm not suggesting he do that, but it is the way the Canadiens are playing does suggest that there's a need to just spark something somewhere, and I think giving Monahan to some other people is a way to accomplish that, because he has proven, over the last 2 seasons, whenever he's been healthy, that
he makes other players better, and we see it all the time on the ice. How well he facilitates, and I asked Tanner Pearson last week about what makes Monahan easy to read off of, and he laughed. And he said, or I asked him, what's it like to read off Monahan? And he laughed. He just said, it's so easy. Like, he just makes everything easy. And he just has this knack for knowing what the next play is and where that next play is going to happen. And he's always on it. And if you watch him closely, like even on television, but I know I do it at the games, sometimes I'll watch Sean Monahan for a shift and just follow him around. And that's what he does. He's on his way to where the puck's about to be all the time. And so I think giving him to Slav and maybe Caulfield, if you want to keep that duo together, would not be a bad idea.
So we brought up Gallagher's penalties. As a team, the Canadians are the most penalized teams in terms of the number of times that they were shorthanded, the number of minors that they have. Also, they lead the league in both categories. So, and it's not just Gallagher. Goulie's right up there, 8 minor penalties. Xhekaj leads the league at 11. So, but it's been an issue for a lot of people. And after the game last night, I tweeted a few minutes before Martin St. Louis said the same thing, so it made me look smart. I wrote that the Canadians had what they deserved, basically, because even though the score was 6-5, just the overall, way that the game was played in terms of scoring chances, which that was bunkers how much the Golden Knights dominated, and the Canadians shot themselves in the foot with their lack of discipline. And I know that some people said, "Oh, well, what did you expect? They're the Stanley Cup champions. We're not nearly as good a team as they are." Fine, in terms of structure, depth, level of talent, I understand all that, but discipline is something that can be fixed if you stop being behind the play. And if you don't chase the game, if you don't chase the puck in your opponents, you can limit the number of penalties. So that's all those PKs are bound to put them in trouble. There's just no two ways around it. No matter how effective your PK is, and it hasn't been necessarily stellar, but it's all right, I guess. But I mean, it cannot. It's a known fact in the NHL that at some point, even the best PKs, if you provide too many opportunities to the other team, they'll find a way to beat it.
Yeah, and discipline isn't only about penalties. Discipline is the way you play. Discipline is there's a lot of ways to measure it. And the Canadians didn't play the way they play when they're disciplined. Martin St. Louis talks all the time about starting the other team's offense. Well, there were lots of turnovers at the offensive blue line, neutral zone, what have you, that just sort of jump-started the Golden Knights attack. I mean, thank God for Caden Primeau, because
I know
in all situations, the Golden Knights had 42 shot attempts in the first period. 42.
Crazy.
It was 42-17. The Canadians in the game, in all situations, finished with 51. William Karlsson alone.
They doubled it. They finished, the Golden Knights finished at 90, 93?
96 to 51. It was almost double in all situations. Yeah. William Karlsson, in all situations, had 8 high danger scoring chances. The Canadians had 7. So it just goes to show, like, that they were giving up. I mean, the Golden Knights in the first period had 16 high danger chances in the first period. I mean, Caden Primeau did not allow a goal in the first period. I sat with Caden Primeau today after practice for a while. He was quite pleased with how a goalie who gives up 6 goals is not usually going to be all that feeling great about himself the next day, but Caden Primeau did. And I think he said, I could totally see why. There's no reason for him to feel otherwise. I mean, he said that the first goal is the one he'd like to have back, the one by Brett Howden, the shorthanded goal. They were up 2-0. It was early in the second. He felt like that was a real moment, but Alonen scored not that long after that. But otherwise, he's like, I didn't really feel like I mentioned the 40 something shot attempts, and he laughed. He's like, yeah, Marty mentioned that in the room after the first period, and I was just kind of sitting there like, yeah, that's a lot. But he said he didn't actually feel like it was that much, like he was honestly, he was in the game, and it was a great period. And even in the third, he's doing great until Gallagher took those two penalties, and they capitalized. And I don't know a goalie in the world who's going to stop that Jack Eichel shot. The wraparound by Stone, yeah, maybe, but that Eichel shot he had a lot of room. He moved into a perfect shooting possession, and that's an elite shooter picking a corner with a really hard and nice shot. So, kudos on Caden Primeau. Managed to do that first game in 8 days, and really said that his mindset in terms of staying, he's approaching every practice like it's a game. Like that's been his sort of technique. He had about 36 hours notice that he was going to play, so he was told before practice on Wednesday. But to his credit, he said that didn't change anything to how I approached practice Wednesday. I approached it the same way because I approach every practice like it's a game, and that's how I'm staying sharp. And really, the way Primeau's playing, I think he's, the one thing that changes is that he's like, every time I go in there, I just want to put it in their mind, like, let's give that guy more games. Like, let's give that guy more games. That's what he's got as his goal. I think he's doing that. I think the Canadians have to legitimately start wondering, we have to find him some more games. I mean, I think he's not going to play against Boston, but when they go on this road trip, when they leave on Monday, they have 3 games in 4 nights. I would imagine Primeau should get one of those. But is proving that instead of being sort of a goalie tandem with a third goalie thrown in every now and then, that maybe they really do need to go to more of a trio of goalies and get him some more action, because he's deserved it.
I wonder if this situation right now, because they'll want to find a solution to that conundrum, and I think that Jake Allen is the most likely goalie to be moved at this point. But they need to see if Caden Primeau is ready to handle the duties and face the music at the NHL level on a more consistent basis. So. And he has not played many games, but those that he played were against worthy opponents. He faced the New Jersey Devils. He faced the Detroit Red Wings, who are a pretty tough opponent. Then yesterday the Stanley Cup champions. Those are tough assignments. He has not been given the San Jose Sharks. So there's certainly a scenario that I could see where they say, okay, well, we need to know. And as soon as we're comfortable enough with what we see from Caden Primeau, then we can finalize a deal involving Jake Allen and make Primeau the backup to Samuel Montembeault. But so I understand that it's hard to come up to that conclusion when you're rotating 3 guys, but this will have to happen.
It's also there's also 2 different priorities here, and this is the line that management has to toe. Is that management would love to know that, to see that, so that they have a better idea of if they can in fact trade Jake Allen, and if they can, it's they don't know that yet. They don't even know if they're going to be able to sign Montembeault long term, even though they've started discussions. But all that comes into play. But they have to ask the coaching staff. And I think they're a bit reticent, as we mentioned in a previous episode, they're a bit reticent to make, to sort of impose lineup decisions on this coach, because he'll go rogue. He will go rogue if you let him. So Primeau has to convince the coaching staff of that. And Marty has made it clear in no uncertain terms that I'm coaching to win every game. And Caden Primeau's development, because he was asked specifically about that notion of coaching to win every game as it pertains to Primeau, and Primeau's development takes a backseat to that. And he's still coaching this team as if they're a potential playoff team. despite the fact they only have 2 regulation wins and are now last in the NHL in that category after the San Jose Sharks won their 3rd game in regulation late on Thursday night.
It should not go
He's
unnoticed.
coaching this team.
Nobody should
It
forget
should know.
that fact.
It's a real thing. They have 2 regulation wins in 17 games. But Marty's still coaching this team as if he hopes to make the playoffs with this team. And you and I and everyone else can think that's absolutely ridiculous and preposterous and unrealistic, and that's fine. That could be true, but it's also true that when you're in the fight and when you're a competitor, you kind of want those people to think that way, especially when they look at the standings and they're like, okay, it's not inconceivable that if we go on a little run and we figure something out that we can make it. So all that to say that Primeau's sitting there, and it was funny today. He said it kind of quietly. He's like, I'm trying to make it so that they want me to play. It's like, yeah, of course. I was like, it's kind of cute.
That's how it works.
That's how it works. But he's like, that's what I want. That's what I'm trying to do. It's not easy, but but that's what I want. So I'm sure management wants that too. It's just, it's a situation that's not going anywhere. So I think it's incumbent on Marty to come to grips with the fact that it's fine that you want to coach this team as if it's trying to make the playoffs, but Caden Primeau is not going to prevent you from doing that. At least not the way he's played so far this season, in my opinion.
Because he has really tightened the gap between him and the other 2 goalies in terms of performances.
Yeah.
He looks like an NHL goalie and he gives you a chance to win. He did, first half of the game yesterday did even more than that. And he's done. He's been good 2 games in a row, and I don't remember seeing two convincing performances in a row from Primeau in the past at the NHL level. But maybe that St. Louis thinking of, well, we have a decent shot at making the playoffs despite our record, despite our 2 regulation wins, have to do with the amount of chances that they're generating. I have in front of me the ratio of chances that are calculated by natural stat trick, and it's pretty interesting because from game to game, if you take all strength, the majority of games this year, the Canadians have had the advantage in the number of high danger chances. They've had more than their opponent, and in any given game, the worst differential was giving up 6 chances against, more than they have of their own. A -6. That was until yesterday against Vegas when they ended the game -25 in terms of chances. So that was that was crazy, man. That was So 7 high danger chances for 32 chances against. The highest number they had previously was 23. That was against in a game against the Capitals. But in that game, they still had 18 of their own, so they ended up -5. So they've been competitive, in terms of trading chances in pretty much all of their games. So maybe that to a certain extent, it's fresh in our mind. The game happened yesterday. There might be an outlier. It might be an outlier in itself, but there's certainly a recency bias in the way that we perceive this team, just because of how badly they got beaten, despite making it only a 1-goal game.
Well, I mean, because right now, in part because of that game, they're allowing the 3rd most high danger chances per 60 in the NHL at all strengths.
Yeah, and that's now yesterday's game. It's 2 games in one.
Yeah, that's it. It's so prior to yesterday's game. Yeah, but even prior to yesterday's game, they were 7th in the league in terms of high danger chances against per 60. So yes, it bumped them up from 7th to 2nd in a single game, which is pretty ridiculous. But they are giving up a lot of chances, and the chance generation is coming kind of in waves. It's going up and down as the season comes along. But
listen, I wanted to bring up, because you mentioned the 3 goalies and whatnot. Now there's a situation with Xhekaj being injured. So for now, he's day to day. They probably are going to have a more clear picture of the situation in a day or two. I don't think that calling him day to day means that it's not serious and we can expect him back on the ice tomorrow. I think it's more they don't have clarity yet.
It's more like don't ask us later.
Exactly.
Is what day to day means. Yeah.
Right. So luckily, Jordan Harris is ready to come back. He seems to be in one game, out one game. I suspect he's not miraculously 100% and ready to go for the rest of the season. It's a situation worth monitoring. But anyway, he's going to be back. He's going to face the Boston Bruins in Boston for the first time of his career. He's excited about that. But the thing is, the Canadiens after that, well, they're already leaving for a long trip, and they're going to be in California all of next week. How can they go if Xhekaj is not available? If Harris is fit to play but not entirely healthy, and if Gustav Lindstrom is on your top six on defense, how can they leave for California with six defensemen?
If Gustav Lindstrom is Gustav Lindstrom, it's basically when you have
yeah. Never forget to pronounce the N in his name, otherwise it's a whole different player.
Exactly. But I've always we've assumed in the past that they'll never go out west without an extra. You remember what Reb Pitlick had to do last season when they went to Calgary without an extra forward, and all of a sudden Brendan Gallagher got banged up.
Yeah,
Reb Pitlick had to do a cross country and didn't make it in time for the game and all this stuff. So they've done it. They've done it in the past. So we'll see. But it's because the situation in Laval is not on defense is not ideal. Listen, I mean, to replace Xhekaj, you would need a left shot, ideally.
Yeah.
I don't think they want to bring up Logan Mailloux anytime soon. They want to give him a long runway in Laval. They want to leave him there as long as possible. Jaden Strubal's been okay. Currently suspended in the AHL. I don't think that impacts his ability to play in the NHL. But
anyway, on
he's
Friday
a couple hours away from Friday night's game would be the last game of his suspension, but I don't think it's really relevant. He might be a possibility. There's two guys who had really good training camps in Trudeau and Norlinder who haven't really transitioned those training camps into the regular season. I think they would be candidates. They haven't been stellar, let's say, in Laval.
Well, Strubal's been quite good. Norlinder's been
Norlinder and Trudeau.
Norlinder's been scratched.
Norlinder's been scratched. Trudeau's been. It's both of them. I'm talking about those two. Strubal's been good, and Strubel would probably be the most deserving call up based on merit. But I do know that the Canadiens are very wary of calling up the rookies from Laval. They'd rather not. If they can avoid it, they'd rather not. Which is why Mailloux wasn't called up when they called. Lindstrom's been called up twice now. They would rather leave Mailloux there on the right side. And I wonder if Strubel would fall into the same category because it's, Norlinder's, this is his third season in Laval. He's been there a while.
Yeah.
Trudeau's in his second year. And there's a couple of veteran guys that they could maybe call up if they so desire. It's my understanding is that they're going to err on the side of keeping the rookies in Laval all year, if at all. So unless Joshua Roy makes it completely impossible to keep him in Laval, and it becomes obvious that he's wasting his time in Laval, which I don't think is the case right now, even though he's one of the top scorers in the league, they'd rather keep him there as well. And he has no problem staying there, as we mentioned in the previous episode. But it's, so in this situation, I think one of the more veteran-ish options would probably get the call over Strubel. That would be my guess. I could be wrong, but that would be how I think they see it.
But you have to look at the guys who have NHL contracts. There's not a ton of them. There's if the more veteranish guys are Nicolas Baudin and Brady Keeper. Keeper's a right-handed shot. Baudin's played only 5 games. I don't know exactly what his status is, but
I consider Norlinder a veteranish guy. at
Okay,
this
but
point.
I don't
He's
consider
more
him a
veteranish
possibility.
than Struble.
Yeah, but I don't consider him a
No,
possibility at all. Not with the type of defense that he's been providing to the Rocket. He's really been struggling. You were mentioning how you don't put too much stock in differentials, but last time I checked, it was -11, the worst on the team, -11 in 12 games. It's been painful for him. Strobel and Trudeau are probably the two guys that I would consider under the circumstances. But yeah, they're younger guys. Strubel's 22, Trudeau's 21. I don't know if age is a big factor over years of professional service. But I mean,
I'll just say that
you're
I'll just say
growing
that
thin very
Lindstrom.
quickly.
Well, I'll just say that Lindstrom was -6 in 4 games, and
Yeah,
it didn't stop them from calling him up. That's all I'm saying.
yeah. But at the time that he was called up, yeah, no, I understand. But there's
Yeah.
they were a bit in in the squeeze, weren't they, because of the circumstances that he was called up with. Well, that
Well,
was
they flew him in from Winnipeg. There was a morning flight. It landed at
yeah.
noon. It wasn't all that complicated, so it was fine. But yeah, I mean, listen, it's again, I think it's the rookie status more than the age that's going to
Mhm.
determine things, and uh, that's why. I mean, Norlander is struggling for sure. I think Trudeau's had definite ups and downs this season. It's not as if he's had a fantastic season, even though he's playing better now. But it's so. But I think one of those two guys are
Mhm.
going to be the ones, unless it's Baudin, because Baudin could be an option. Would
So
be an interesting option actually. I think it'd be cool
Nicolas
to
Baudin,
see what he's
yeah.
got at the NHL level. Because yeah,
What's so prior to him being injured, Xhekaj, had everybody been healthy, we've discussed that in the press box, you and I. Xhekaj was not having a great start to the season. It's something that you could
no,
tell, you could see right from the beginning of training camp. He's been struggling both with the puck and also in defending in his own end. He's been definitely very
mm-hmm.
physical. He's been focused on being a presence, showing that he's the sheriff. That's all good, but I don't think that he's been improving or shown a great leap forward both in his offensive game and defensive game. So it's a bit too bad. I really hope that he's going to be all right, and it's not going to be the same scenario as last year when it comes to his shoulder. But what we had seen so far from him
different
this season,
shoulder,
it's different shoulder. I know, different shoulder, but
different shoulder. By the way, yeah.
hopefully,
Just
hopefully the
in
same
case anyone out
scenario.
there is wondering if it's the same one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this beginning of the season was, I thought, a bit difficult, and maybe that if they didn't have those issues in terms of moving guys down or calling guys up, if he would not have been the type of guy that would have benefited from a little stint in Laval, because
Well,
he's
David
way
Savard
more
is skating. He skated again this morning, and when he comes back, Lindstrom actually I thought looked okay against Vegas, better than he did against Calgary. That pairing was terrible in that game. So yeah, when Savard comes back, I mean, it's possible that they just decide to keep Lindstrom, move Harris over to the left, and send Xhekaj to Laval. I don't think they would, but it shouldn't. He shouldn't be exempt from it. It's like
no.
He hasn't been great, and Marty was asked today what they're going to miss with Arbor out. And he's like, physical presence, and that was it.
Yeah.
So it hasn't been a very smooth start to the season. But listen, talking about speaking of Laval, it's a good opportunity to transition to our Prospect Friday. Sean Farrell,
Yeah.
super interesting case in the sense that Sean Farrell in both the rookie tournament and in training camp did not look like a guy who was ready to make a smooth transition to professional hockey. And, he is entering Friday night's game against Lehigh Valley, has 6 points in his last 3 games, 5 in his last 2. So has really figured something out in his producing at a pretty good clip. 11 points in 13 games as a rookie. What should we make of this? What do you think we should make of this?
Well, I think that first and foremost, apart from the points, there's the fact that he's shown to be very responsible and very dependable whenever he's put on the ice. He's one of the forwards that play the most on the team. And he's on the ice for a lot more chances for than chances against. So JFL has no issues whatsoever to put him out there because he's playing smart hockey defensively. He's really helping out in getting the puck out of the zone. So there's that aspect. He's been paired with Joshua Roy, and the two of them are on the tear together. There are two guys that are very creative offensively, that like to both make plays in tight areas. And they've been, I mean, for all the good press that Joshua Roy has had since the beginning of the season, well, Sean Farrell, since they've been put together, have had every bit as a word to say in his success than the other way around. So right now, what I find interesting with Sean Farrell, because he flew totally under the radar during camp, and because he was not the flavor of the month anymore.
Well, he looked like a child. I mean, he looked like a kid. He really did.
Well, you know what? He's going to look like a kid for a long time because that's what his face is, and that's the body that he's got.
But his game, he just looked overwhelmed by everything, you know. So
yeah, but I spoke to JFL about that and the fact that, you know, because it's always a struggle for smaller players to adapt to professional hockey, and you know how we say about the American League, how it's a tough league. It's more physical. There's less space because guys don't always know where to go, and it gets clunky, and so it can easily stifle some of the smaller players. And in the past, JFL has would put guys like for example, Riley Kidney and Farrell in the same basket because they're both of them smaller players that are getting introduced to regular minutes in the AHL. But the thing that really differentiates the two of them now is that Farrell, despite his smaller stature, is able to evade coverage because of the quality of his skating, the quality of his edges, the fact that he can pivot, change directions quickly. So he can elude opponents that way and create more time for himself, which is something that Riley Kidney has not been able to do so far. And the other component to this is that JFL told me that he's ahead of most of his teammates when it comes to taking information. You know, shoulder checks, play scanning. He'll look up, take the information, process it early on so that he gives himself a fraction of a second more to figure out what he's going to do with his next play. So getting that information, making quick decisions and the right ones is really something also that helps him to continue and generate offense despite the fact that he's at a size disadvantage. So
the guy who graduated from Harvard in 3 years is good at processing information, is what you're saying.
Yeah. Surprise. But you know, I mean, he's got to figure out how to survive and find a niche for himself with his attributes and his shortcomings. But he's got an elite brain, and he's got to use it to compensate for the fact that he's never going to be the biggest guy. He's never going to be the fastest guy either. But he might not be the fastest, but he's very agile. So that seems to be working for him so far this season. And you gave the stats earlier. I mean, even though he entered the game on Friday night again with 3 goals. 3 goals and 3 assists in his last 3 games. Pretty good. So I think it's encouraging because
and the one thing I think it's.
Go ahead.
Well, it's worth mentioning that when you say he's one of the AHL doesn't publish ice time, and so when he's one of the more used forwards on the team, and obviously if he's going to be paired with Joshua's been sort of the top offensive player on the team. I think JF you start with a strike against you when you're a smaller player with him. And your burden of proof is higher when you're Sean Farrell's size or you're Riley Kidney's size. I mean, the whole reason they sent, well, not the whole reason, but one of the reasons they sent Philip Meshar to Kitchener is JF was somewhat uncomfortable with the idea of having 3 rookies of smaller stature that he had to get ice time for all at the same time. It was going to be difficult for him to find all 3 of them consistent ice time, and it was not going to do Philip Meshar or the organization or JF Houle or the Rocket any good to have Meshar in that mix. As it is, now clearly he doesn't have an issue, but at the time that they sent Meshar down, he was wondering, how am I going to get Farrell these minutes when he's the way he is, when he's that size, So good on Farrell. Farrell's, we were talking earlier how Caden's like, I want to convince him to give me more games. Well, Farrell's convincing him to give him more minutes because despite his size, he has that strike against him from the start in the AHL with this coach because he's a fervent believer in the physical challenges that this league presents to smaller players.
Yeah. So it's going to, I'm really intrigued to see how it's going to evolve for Farrell. If he keeps it up like that, he could position himself for a call up later on this year. But in the big picture, I really wonder what his place in the organization is going to be. And I still think that this is a guy who's got enough talent to make an NHL career. But I wonder if it's going to be with Montreal. If he shows that he's a very successful player at the American League level, maybe that he could become an interesting trading chip for Montreal. But with Caulfield in there, eventually one day with Lane Hudson in there, how many small guys do you want on your team? I'm not sure that Sean Farrell will be a guy that's going to just be in the mix. But when you look at what he can provide and his attributes, he certainly has enough to have to carve himself a nice NHL career.
It'd be really funny if they called him up and Marty didn't play him. Just going back to last year.
Yeah, that'd be very funny. That would be Marty going rogue again. Yeah.
Yes, it would. It would be great. All right. Well, that's good. That's going to wrap it up for this Friday's episode. Obviously, Marc-Antoine is in Boston for the game against the Bruins. I am leaving on Monday afternoon for the California trip. So we will record an episode before I leave, obviously, on Monday. It'll be another mailbag episode. And so we love all the questions that you guys are sending in. The inbox is full all the time. Basu and Godin at gmail.com and at Basu and Godin on X or Twitter, where you can submit your questions for the mailbag. And otherwise, hope everyone has a great weekend, and we will talk to you on Monday.
Bye.